Podcast. It is Wednesday, August the 10th. We are in the final. Gentlemen, we have finally made it to the last one, the last of our off-season program, and we are here. Make sure you are following the show on social media if you are not already, at Huddle Up Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. And if you enjoy the show, share it with at least one person you think might enjoy it as well. Get the merchandise over at tpublic.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and the show on all podcast platforms. Jim, Matt, and EJ, as we close out the off-season shows, we are looking today at the biggest what if or what ifs in sports history. And we may also throw in towards the end the biggest what ifs for your favorite teams. So you can start thinking about those as well. But do you guys, either of you, I'll lead them to Matt or EJ. You guys can take the first one. Is there one that comes to mind for you that's the biggest what if in sports, Matt?
Yeah, we kind of alluded to it earlier when we were talking about who we would take in their prime to be on our favorite sports team, and I brought Ken Griffey Jr. to the table, and we all kind of discussed what would have been if injuries hadn't derailed his career. And I think, in terms of the numbers that he put up with an injury-shortened career, I mean, those are numbers that obviously Hall of Fame easily for him when he came onto the ballot. But if not for some injury-shortened seasons, like what are we looking at in terms of statistics-wise for Ken Griffey Jr.? Like, we easily have a home run king in Ken Griffey Jr. that isn't mired by any sort of controversy like we have now. No disrespect to what Barry Bonds did, but that's always going to be the kind of cloud that's hanging over his number, his accomplishments. We don't have that with Griffey, and I probably would even put forth that we see him break the single season record as well at some point during his career with how pure that swing was. And as he got older, just transitioning into like a DH type of role and being there for the remainder with no injuries to worry about. I think Ken Griffey Jr. and Jim, we've talked about this before. Are there sports where there is a definitive GOAT? Baseball, I don't think there is one. But if Griffey's career isn't hampered by that, I would argue that he is probably the de facto greatest of all time baseball player. For what he did at the plate and in the field.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah, because that's the thing with baseball is you can have a guy who's great in the field who isn't the best at bat, or you can have a great hitter who is more, especially in the American League, spent a portion of their career as a DH, or a great just a great starting pitcher, or you have a guy like Cal Ripken who was reliable. Obviously always on the field for the majority of his career, and a great fielder, not the greatest of hitters. Nobody's ever putting him in like a Mount Rushmore of positions, but he's still one of the best baseball players of all time because, again, he's always there and he was always at a certain level. So, yeah, I think that's what's really hard with baseball. Yeah, Griffey definitely up there. One for me, and it's not like my top one, but it's kind of on the same lines as you, Matt, when you're talking about statistics and what could have been with this is, what if Barry Sanders didn't retire in his prime?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that rushing record is untouchable if he doesn't retire.
Yeah, I mean,
no one's coming close to that.
And even what if he was with a better team? Like, let's be honest about that too. Like, he was doing that with just a terrible team. You put him behind that Cowboys offensive line. Woof. I mean, it's not even close. And he probably doesn't retire. Like, I don't, I know, and it's been good to see him come back into like the football world and do more stuff. I mean, even during like Super Bowl week, he does a lot of media appearances. But like, I don't know if he disappears from the existence of football if he's not a Detroit Lion. But EJ, what's one big one that comes to your mind when you hear?
Probably my biggest NBA one. What if Grant Hill didn't get hurt? Like, had those injuries he had in the middle of his career. Grant Hill had a fantastic college career. His first couple years in the league in Detroit, co-rookie of the year with Jason Kidd, fantastic start to his career, and then the injuries piled up. I am convinced that Grant Hill would have been a top 10 player of all time. Like to me, the way we look at LeBron, I'm convinced Grant Hill's skill set, because his skill set was, I would argue, probably if not better than LeBron James, because his shot was probably better than LeBron's coming out of the gate. His mid range game was great. He was smooth, and his game translated in a way where it could have aged well too. Especially, I argue Grant Hill would be a top 10 all time, maybe top 5 all time player because of his talent. He was that good. He was that good, and right when he was getting to his peak, his powers, the injuries started piling up, and it was bad from there. But man, Grant Hill would have been, to me, he's definitely my biggest NBA what if of all time.
Can I pose an NBA what if to you, EJ, while we're talking NBA?
Yeah.
So what if Shaq doesn't go to LA, stays in Orlando with Penny? Is Kobe talked about the same way? And how many titles does that Magic team bring to Orlando?
They eventually get there. It's funny. I did the I don't know what was the it was actually a topic probably we'll talk about on my podcast probably a year or two ago with somebody else, but this came up about Orlando, how they kept that team together. You look at the Eastern Conference back in the late 90s. The Bulls were ending at some point. 98. The Bulls ended at some point.
Michael was kind of on his way out after.
He was still great, obviously.
Reemergence.
Yeah. Orlando was that next team in line.
Mm-hmm.
Penny was that good. Penny was healthy, of course. You saw Shaq how great he became, even after that.
Yeah,
because Shaq was already great then.
Yep.
And Shaq becomes fucking absolutely unstoppable in LA. You get that Shaq in Orlando with Penny, and also with a player that can actually facilitate him more than Kobe did.
Yeah.
They win about 2-3 titles at least.
I mean, you bring up LeBron. What if he doesn't make the decision, or if his decision is to stay in Cleveland? I think that
he may get a title.
I mean, and do we talk about him? You think about the episode from a couple weeks ago. Are we talking about him along the lines of the Barkleys, the Griffeys, the Marinos, the guys that are the greatest ever to not win one?
Seriously, he may not win a title there, because part of the problem of him and why he left, and people don't understand this, he wasn't drawing talent to him.
Right.
Okay? They tried to get Chris Bosh in 2010 to come to Cleveland. He said, no, I'll play with you, but not in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Come to Miami. That's why the Miami thing was worked out, because people will say, well, we'll play with you, but somewhere else, either Chicago or Miami.
Oh, yeah. I always said that Cleveland made the decision, not LeBron.
The only reason that he won that title with Cleveland was because they gifted the Cavs so many number one picks after he left.
To get Kyrie, right.
To get Kyrie and to get the weapons to trade for Kevin Love.
Right.
I mean, and they had, 3 first overall picks within 6 years?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't see that in an NBA lottery these days.
Right.
And so that was the only reason why his decision to go back to Cleveland, and even then that he almost didn't get that title in Cleveland. I mean, that was a stretch.
Yeah, it was pulling teeth, man. It really was.
I mean, he almost didn't get one of them in Miami either. So, I mean, what if Ray Allen misses that shot? Are we putting LeBron James?
Well, they get one. They get one. They get the first one. That's it.
Right, but still, I mean, that's one. And this was supposed to be the super team.
Correct.
I mean, we saw them come together. Dallas takes them down year one. Then they get it. And then, I mean, the Spurs were so close to just shutting that door.
I still get nightmares of that fucking Spurs series, even the one we won. No, but I do think, and I'm making a LeBron thing here, I do think losing to Dallas in year one was a good thing for Miami. Because I'm not sure they win additional ones after that, because they came in very cocky and this and that, and they beat Dallas. Okay, this is supposed to happen, this and that, and then they probably lose a couple more. I mean, I think the losing the first one made them hungrier and made them really look into that roster and really try to make things better. And that was a year. It wasn't until year two that LeBron got the Heat team. Year one, it was still Dwayne's team in year one. Yeah. Year two became LeBron's team.
Go ahead, Matt.
So to go back then to the original part of the Shaq question, though, EJ, is Kobe still the Kobe we know if he doesn't have Shaq for those years in LA?
I'm so glad I said that, though, because my other what if was actually what if Kobe did not get traded from Charlotte to LA? What if? It's funny you said that. No, I still think Kobe gets the respect because he was that good. and he figured it out.
But is he winning that many titles without Shaq?
No, the titles, no.
Right.
You'll,
so that
you'll
I mean,
probably
that goes
have
back to a couple weeks ago, and
right.
and we put Kobe and LeBron in that same conversation.
But the
Kobe
difference
to me is the all-time greatest. When you ask Matt, who do you think is the best basketball player of all time, I will always say Kobe Bryant. But I don't know that we get to that level if he doesn't have Shaq to feed off of for those few years when he's maturing as a basketball
I'll
player.
say this. He won't have 5. Okay? Yeah. But the difference between LeBron and Kobe is that Kobe is in LA. They can draw talent. They can draw free agents. And they did. And they
have
did
the
that
market.
in the back.
Yeah.
Right. And they did that with Pau Gasol and those guys on the back end of the 2 titles he won after Shaq left. So at least in terms of the environment, Kobe would have the advantage of having, a front office that's by the way, it's always been aggressive, even before Kobe and Shaq was there. So they'll draw in guys. So that, he'll get a few titles off the clip, but he won't probably get 5.
Okay.
One of the ones I'd written down, and it's it's not my number one, but it's an intriguing one from an NBA standpoint. Is what if the Trailblazers draft Michael Jordan?
Yeah,
because they took Bowie, and left Jordan obviously to the Bulls. That changes, and a couple of the ones the ones I had written down. There's a few like that where, like in the NFL, what if the tuck rule gets called the other way, or as some people probably say the correct way?
The Pats don't. No,
the Pats don't. The Pats obviously don't win that year
because Bledsoe gets a job back next year.
Right. Like, I mean, that was one of the reasons that kept Brady gave Brady his job and locked him into that job. But like, would they have seen the writing on the wall that Brady's younger and can lead the team regardless? Like, would they still have won? Like, it's definitely one of those.
Touch on your first one though. I love your first one about the Jordan.
Yeah, let's Sean.
Here's Sean
jumping in with us, joining us again this week. Hopefully he can.
Can you hear me or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't registering on the previous thing. All right, cool.
So we're doing the biggest what ifs in sports history, and I brought up it because we were on an NBA road for a little. Is what if the Trailblazers drafted Michael Jordan instead of Sam Bowie? And EJ, you were
no right. So I still think Jordan gets titles, if not earlier, because think about it. They get Clyde Drexler, who at that time was probably the second best shooting guard in the league at that time.
They drafted him the year before. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Those two are growing together.
Right,
That's
exactly.
a scary tandem.
Portland was going to finals before Jordan got there. Okay, in the West. And they had better teams for a good 3, 4, 5 year stretch. You put Jordan in that conversation too, especially, he might win more than 6 because Portland had some really stacked teams for a good while.
Yeah.
So yeah, it actually might be better for Jordan in the long run.
Which is insane.
We're not talking about Chicago Bulls merch like we are these days. Like no one knows who the Chicago Bulls really are. They're like a Pistons team or a Pacers team.
Like, do we know who Scottie Pippen is? Like, Rodman doesn't end up in Chicago. Rodman
might end up in Portland.
He might end up in Portland.
It's a weird scenario because both those teams. Clyde Drexler probably being one of the big reasons for it, but the two teams ahead. Nobody questions Hakeem Olajuwon at 1 overall.
Right.
Let's not forget that someone drafted Hakeem Olajuwon over Michael Jordan, which, when you really look at the rankings of players historically, was still technically a stupid decision. When you really look at, overall right now, was Hakeem Olajuwon one of the best players I've ever watched play? Yeah.
Top 10, 11 players all time. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
He's an unbelievable player.
2 titles,
was he Michael
too.
Jordan? No. Yeah, he won 2 titles the years that Michael Jordan left to play baseball. It's not
although no one thought Jordan would be this good. No one had Jordan pegged to be the greatest player of all time.
By the way, sorry, I had technical difficulties. Had to cut out because my phone died. Is this the first of the what ifs? Is this the first?
Yeah. We're just kind of rolling through them. We're not
throwing them out randomly.
Okay, all right. Well, because along the lines of the Michael Jordan one was because it surfaced was one of my what ifs that I had debated was what if Michael Jordan hadn't left for 2 years?
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
They
you know,
okay.
Because it's like it's not so much like, you know, would they have won? Because it's like if he plays, like, do they win 2 more? And if so, all of a sudden it's like all these players that play now where it's like, well, I have more, you know, well, Kobe won more this way. Jordan left 2, like, I mean, he was at his apex.
Yep.
You know, because then it's like, is the what if really like, what if he hadn't left, or is the what if really like, what if his dad hadn't gotten, you know,
murdered? Do you think he wins 2 titles? Do you think he wins 2 titles? No, for the record, he left a year and a half. He came back for the second part of that year.
Yes.
Lost Orlando in the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was chemistry, and it was just, you know, it's hard to jump back in any aspect, and like when you're jumping back in after what he had gone through and like the time away and you know, that's a big ask, and there was a lot put on his shoulders, even more so than other years. So I don't put that one on. No one puts it on him.
See, that one you just said is actually a great one, because this is something I've been debating for years. People assume he won 8 in a row. I say no. If you knew the NBA back then too, especially, and you knew Jordan, what we know now in hindsight, before his dad even got murdered, Jordan was burnt out anyway. He said he was burnt out. He was burnt out. And so he retires, obviously, when his dad gets murdered. Now, that Bulls team in 93-94 was still pretty much the same team minus Jordan, input Pete Myers, okay? The Bulls win 2 less games than they did without Jordan. And that team almost went to the finals that year, okay? Maybe they win or get to the finals in 94. In 95, hell no. Because losing Horace Grant, people don't understand. Losing Horace Grant was
Horace Grant is incredibly undervalued.
Yes. It's the reason they lost to Orlando. It's why they got Dennis Rodman.
Well, I was just gonna say he's a big part. When people remember that Shaq and Penny, you know, Orlando tandem, they forget that like Horace Grant was there too,
right?
And that was a big piece of that. Not to mention, you know, obviously the Nick Andersons and the Scotts.
Of course, yeah.
They had a good team there in Orlando, but yeah, Horace Grant very underappreciated as far as a piece of that puzzle.
Losing Horace Grant is the reason they got Dennis Rodman in the first place. Because in 95, if you watch, even when Jordan came back, they played better with Jordan when he came back. They were actually game on the 500 when Jordan came back to the team. And then they went on a little run. I think they got the 5 seed in the East that year. They beat Charlotte in the first round of playoffs. But you notice if you watch that series against Charlotte, watch the series against Orlando, the biggest issue by the way, congrats to the Orioles, they won 10 in a row. The biggest issue with the Bulls was that they were thin in the middle. Shaq destroyed them. Horace Grant in Orlando destroyed them, which is why they went after Rodman in free agency that very next summer, and of course the rest is history.
Absolutely. Sean, is there a what if in sports that sticks out to you as a big what if in sports?
Well, I tried thinking and narrowing it down, and I came across the Michael Jordan one. You know, and I came across a couple in each sport, and the one that, and maybe it's because I just keep stumbling upon highlights of this person, and for me it's an NFL what if, and for me it's a no-brainer for me, only because I still value this individual so highly. But what if Barry Sanders does not retire at the age? I had
actually brought that one up.
That was
if Barry Sanders plays until his body actually asks him to retire, you know, where are the record books then?
Yeah. It's over 20,000 yards.
I mean, it's because I mean he at the time, I mean he's easily like a season from breaking Walter Payton's record.
Yeah,
1 season.
Yeah,
and walks away at it's not even an age that's considered old now.
No, it's in his prime, or maybe even before his prime. And I said too, when I brought it up, is what if he didn't play for the Lions? Like, what if he's on a better team? I mean, I know he had to shoulder a lot of the load because they were so bad.
Well, and that's just it. Like, it was a franchise that it's probably the only franchise I've seen, one of the few, that on like 3rd and 19 would hand the ball off, because it was their best chance to get 19 yards.
Right.
You know, Barry Sanders had a lot of 3rd and long carries.
Right.
That worked. And they still couldn't win. And I mean, and I'm a guy that stands by. I mean, you can sell me on Jim Brown all day. I love the way Jim Brown ran. You can sell me on Walter Payton and Gale Sayers and Emmitt Smith, Jamal, whoever you want to sell me on. I can appreciate any running back in the game, but there is no one I've watched in my lifetime. And I was still pretty young when I watched Barry Sanders. But even as someone now that goes back and watches footage of Barry Sanders, I mean, when you look at from the time he gets the ball to the time he's on the ground, if he's on the ground, to me, there's no one else that ran more elusively and confused defenses more than Barry Sanders.
I was thinking in real time, like even when Emmett was dominating with Dallas, in the early '90s, everybody was saying that it's still Barry with a bullet.
Yeah, Emmitt Smith was not the best of the two.
No,
Emmitt Smith by the end of it,
he ended up with the most yards, but he wasn't the best.
Most yards, he ended up with more touchdowns, but he just kept playing.
Yeah,
and,
it's again, it's something we touched on a couple weeks ago when you talk about greatness versus championships and all of that. Like sticking with, Emmett wasn't the best of those two running backs, and everybody telling me Troy Aikman was the greatest quarterback the Cowboys ever. I don't believe that. I don't think Troy Aikman was good, but he wasn't that great.
Hot take. Tony Romo's better than Troy Aikman.
Tony Romo's the best quarterback the Cowboys have ever had. I think so.
I think he's definitely, if not number one, number two at least.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Staubach, but the game was very different. So again, you're talking different eras. But yeah, Romo definitely better than Aikman without question. For me, one I had, and I'm looking at it from a hockey standpoint, is what if Mario Lemieux doesn't get Hodgkin's disease?
Oh yeah.
That crossed my mind as well.
That change, because Gretzky's career numbers were incredible, but Lemieux, at that time it was still an era where scoring was out of control, and he was unbelievable. And the fact that you had both of those guys, Gretzky was past his peak. When Lemieux was getting into his, and he came back and he was still good, but he was never the same, and then he had the back problems and stuff too. I think Lemieux challenges some of Gretzky's career numbers.
I agree.
I think he pushes a few.
Yeah,
I don't know if some of those points numbers.
Points probably not, but goals maybe.
Maybe.
I think he's the LeBron to Gretzky's Jordan. If he stays healthy,
I think it's something like that. The issue is and Gretzky always had great. Well, you always wonder. I always wonder when I say Gretzky had great players playing around him.
Messier,
I'm like, were they really, really great, or were they really great because they played with Wayne Gretzky?
I think it's a bit of both, especially once his later years with the Kings.
And I'm like, well, did they just take some of what Gretzky rubbed off on him?
Some of his later years with the Kings, and I think his years with
he carried that Kings
by the time he got to the Blues and the Rangers, it was more teams were better because he was there.
Team to the playoffs.
Yeah,
and that Blues team wasn't that good.
Yeah, another what if too is what if the Oilers don't trade Gretzky to the Kings?
I have an NFL one actually.
Yeah, go.
Kyle will probably appreciate. What if Joe Montana does not get injured in that AFC title game in 1990 against the Giants?
Ooh.
Think about it. They probably win. Now, watching that game, obviously, they probably still win that game with the Giants. Okay? Go to the Super Bowl. Probably Buffalo. We'll see. That's 3 in a row. That's the first repeat and only repeat in NFL history at that point.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, and that hit with Leonard Marshall changes everything.
Sure
changes
does.
A lot of things in the NFL. It changed the course of a lot of things. So
yeah,
that's five titles for Montana.
What does Steve Young become?
Exactly.
If he doesn't get a chance. We touched a little bit on the Tuck rule and giving Brady his opportunity. That was Steve Young's opportunity.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I was wondering if you guys brought up the Tuck rule because that was on my short list. Yeah.
I still think the Patriots end up getting titles, but it's not the dynasty.
Know. I don't know.
Look. Yeah, I do.
The real Brady what if Drew Bledsoe gets up?
Right. Yeah.
That's the ultimate Brady what if. What if Drew Bledsoe just gets up from the hip and walks back onto the field?
Because the thing is with Brady, Bledsoe getting hurt and Brady taking that team to the tuck rule and all that, it's similar to, and
Would
I
Brady be as great if it wasn't just like because Tom Brady is a hard worker. Don't get me wrong.
absolutely,
And Tom Brady did fine at Michigan. He didn't shatter records, obviously. Otherwise, you would not be drafted in the 7th round.
right.
You're and to me, it's just one of those like, was he a guy that was like, this is my shot, like, and you just go, and you don't have time to think, and you just end up on this like, projectile path to greatness. And I'm like, if he had time, like if Bledsoe comes back in and the Patriots kind of fizzle out for the year, and then he like goes somewhere else, maybe not.
Yeah,
because then Brady eventually is like, here, week 1, it's your team. Like, does it ever do anything close?
Because I think what Brady being able to take over in that season told the Patriots is they don't need Drew Bledsoe back. It was so like the decision at that point. The decision wasn't, can we roll with Brady or do we go back to Drew? Like, I think they had their answer, regardless of if the tuck rule is ruled in the favor of the Raiders.
The thing is, to also make it harder, is that had Bledsoe had Brady, that doesn't happen. They go Bledsoe for financial reasons. Remember, Bledsoe that March had just signed a new 10-year, $103 million deal with New England.
Were they going to be able to move him?
Financially, they were stuck with him anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably not a lot of teams taking that contract.
Right. So,
but let's transition away from like the broad sports history. Let's go to our individual teams.
Okay.
And similar to the episode we talked about, the picking the players, pulling them out of retirement. We'll start with basketball. If you have a favorite basketball team, I'm definitely abstaining from this one because there's really no history for me to pull from
Philly,
with the Sixers. But Matt, we'll go to you with the Sixers.
So for me, and I think this is probably the one that's the more recent one, and probably what I think is their closest they've come to the title, is if Kawhi does not get the quadruple bounce, that shot misses, we go to overtime. The Sixers at that point had battled back and had all the momentum, and if Kawhi misses that shot, that arena is just drained of any sort of excitement because they had it to win right there and missed it. I think if he misses that shot, Sixers take it in overtime, and I mean, we saw what happened with injuries to the Bucks and certainly to the Warriors. I think that the Sixers win the title that year.
All right, EJ, do you have one for the Miami Heat?
I want to touch on Matt's part there. They win that series. I don't think they win the title that year, but they keep Jimmy Butler.
Probably
because Butler was their best player in that playoff series. The whole run, he balled in that series. They signed Butler. Most likely.
I mean, if they take it to at least the ECF, then Butler comes back over Ben Simmons for sure.
Right.
Man, would that be something?
Yeah. Butler, and maybe Simmons actually grows up. Who knows? Jeez. Mine goes way back. What if the Heat didn't actually get Pat Riley and they stuck it out with the early team of Rice and Cycli and those guys? I love those old Heat teams. I'm one of probably a few fans that still wax poetic, but I mean, they were moving. It was a slow build, but they were starting to gain something. But then they trade away Steve Smith, and to me, still the worst trade in Heat history for Kevin Willis. Hated that trade. And then when Riley gets there, they trade Glenn Rice, which pissed me off at the time, and of course was the right move at the time because Alonzo Mourning, and then you become relevant again. So what if Pat Riley just come to Miami and they actually kept that cord longer, a couple more years?
All right, Sean, do you have one for the NBA? I mean, I know you're probably at least an adjacent Sixers fan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the Sixers. For me, were always while I was in Philly, we're always the like kind of redheaded cousin. Kind of the whole like we don't really, because at the time they were just awful.
You're not NBA guy.
When I grew up an NBA guy, I grew up through the Jordan era, and I alluded to in the previous episode, just kind of following greatness, and kind of followed Michael and the whole Bulls team, and then I watched college basketball. I remember watching Tim Duncan come out and Marlboro and all those guys. So I kind of just followed individuals.
Right.
And then I went to college in Philadelphia, and at the time, like the Eagles were swelling and the Phillies were starting to swell, and that was exciting. And the Sixers were just kind of there, and they just were stagnant and boring. It was post Iverson by a long shot.
Right.
It was
When he was gone, it was over. Yeah.
The Iguodala years.
Yeah, you were going to see whoever they were playing, and when they won a game, you're like, hey, good for you. Like
Theo Ratliff.
Great job, Theo. So it was a hard one, but I mean, I guess the one Sixers one for me would have just been like, I don't think Iverson played a full career in Philadelphia, and what if Allen Iverson could have just been more like, well, for lack of a better comparison, like a Tom Brady, where he could have been someone that was like, you know what, I'll restructure if it means you're going to get me help, or like, and people will say it, about Tom Brady. People forget LeBron James has done that a few times, where it's like, if you can get me that, like, he did it in Cleveland, and one of the reasons he left was because
we touched on if LeBron, if his decision was to stay.
Right. Well, and that was a big part. Was like, I'll take less money. I'll do whatever. Just get me the pieces, and if Allen Iverson would have been able to do that, turns out Allen Iverson's a bit of a gambler and a little bit has some off the court issues as well. Yeah. But he's got a big payday coming up here shortly. So good for him. But man, it's just baffling to me that's the one is like, how Allen Iverson was unable with the tap. If he could have put anyone around him and played with him, and he could have been a little less me.
I mean that clip when he deeped Jordan out of his
skill
feet
level,
is still one of the greatest clips in NBA history.
There's nobody that I've ever run across that when you bring up Allen Iverson's name is like, well, there's nowhere to find, like when somebody's like, well, Michael Jordan this and LeBron James, and you're like, Allen Iverson. People don't have, other than like his off the field and like his hip hop attitude and the MTV and the like whatever else. There's nothing to say negative about his game,
right?
Other than like maybe selfish.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a shame that they couldn't win with him.
But do you think he kind of had to be, though, given how bad those teams were?
He carried a team into a series with the Lakers in the finals.
Right.
Did they get embarrassed? Yes.
And game the only loss that playoff run. The only loss that the Lakers lost that entire playoff run was that game because game one.
That game.
That game. That is it.
And they lost it to Allen Iverson.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to the Sixers.
All right, let's keep moving here. Let's go to college sports because there's 3 Notre Dame fans here. So EJ, I'm going to go to you first. And because I'm very curious to see with 3 Notre Dame fans what moment is the what if for us. EJ, I'll go to you first though.
Mine's easy. I'm a Florida State fan, so this is easy for me. What if in 91 and especially 91? What if they made that field goal against Miami?
Yeah, that's
wide right.
That's a pretty classic one. That's a pretty classic one there.
They probably won the title that year.
Probably.
I have a good feeling that most of the 3 of us that are what if involves a field goal as well.
Mine doesn't. Mine doesn't. Yours is the field goal against Boston College.
I mean that's
because that's
whether it's the
national
field goal
title
or the game. That's the one for me is like 1993. You just come off the big win off Florida State. You take over the number 1 ranking, and man, I don't know if it's let down.
Boston College, yeah.
Yep. If Boston. What if Boston College burned to the ground in 1990?
Thank you, Boston College. Thank you.
Because at the end of that season, Florida State ended number 1, Notre Dame ended number 2, which still doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying.
What if college football writers?
Boston College burned to the ground.
What if college football writers got it right at the end of the 1993 bowl season?
30.
That's probably one.
It's still bad.
Matt, what is yours for Notre Dame?
Uh-oh.
So we're going to go to the 1995 recruiting class.
Okay.
Where Notre Dame had signed I would say blue chip prospect in Randy Moss, who was eventually not allowed to play that season due to some altercations off the field or on the field. whenever it may have occurred. If we get Randy Moss on that 95 team, I think that changes the trajectory of that mid to late 90s Notre Dame football team overall.
So your what if is less what if Notre Dame had signed Randy Moss, and more if what if Randy Moss hadn't been such an
awful human being off the field.
Randy Moss will come into
after Notre, because he committed to Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame's like, look, nah,
we can't do this.
He tried Florida State, and Bobby Bowden went, nothing I can do for you, son.
Right.
Like if Bobby Bowden's like, no.
Right. How are you getting into Notre Dame?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I don't know everything about Randy Moss's past, but it's got to be real bad if Bobby Bowden
says no.
Yeah, so I guess that is the better what if Randy Moss hadn't
Mossed himself out of Notre Dame.
I'll tell you one thing, Chad Pennington wouldn't be a household name if he had played for Notre Dame.
Matt, yours probably plays a little bit into mine, and it's what if Lou Holtz wasn't forced out after 96?
My runner up to that was the Urban Meyer in 05?
Yeah,
right
when he was hot at Utah. Because
what if Charlie Weiss knew anything?
What if George O'Leary hadn't lied on his resume?
Yeah.
There's a big one. But yeah,
what if Charlie Weiss had learned anything in a Patriots locker room?
Right.
What if he had? I think Charlie Weiss just showed up every day and was just kind of like, "Hey, you need me to do anything?" And they're like, "Nah."
What if Brian Kelly cared about recruiting? There's a wild one. But yeah, I think if Holtz isn't forced out, he breaks Rockney's record. We don't get Bob Davie as a head coach, probably. Thank God.
I had blocked, but now I'm having a stroke.
We probably don't get Tyrone Willingham and
my head hurts.
Charlie White, all of that. But
not Bob Davie. Now all I picture is his face on the sideline.
Awful. All right, let's go to hockey. And I will start off in the 2018 Stanley Cup playoffs. In the 2018 Stanley Cup final, there was a point in game number 2 when the Capitals had a 1-goal lead, and with just under 1 minute to go, Braden Holtby makes what is referred to as the save, where he stops a shot literally with the bend of his goalie stick to keep Vegas from tying it. Because to me, the Caps are already down 1-0 in Vegas. That's game 2. If Vegas ties, I feel like they were a little bit quicker, a little bit fresher. They get the momentum back at home. They probably win that game in overtime. You go back to Washington down 2 games. I think that there's a whole different feel to returning to Washington, because now you're just playing the, well, here we go again thing. And I don't know if they can recover from that loss. So that's the big one. Braden Holtby obviously makes that save and saves us. Sean, we'll go to you with hockey and the Flyers.
Yeah, I mean, the Flyers is just so many. I mean, I kind of wanted to go to that Blackhawks series and be
what if Chuck Fletcher isn't your general manager?
What if Ron Hextall was given a true shot, those kind of things. But I think for me it was what if we could just what if we would have just stuck it out with one of the goalies we had? I mean,
any of them. Pick a name.
Well, I mean, it's just the leash was so short. I mean, you talked about in the previous episode, we talked about are we too championship focused? And I feel like, unfortunately for the Flyers, there was a point there where the Eagles were competitive and the Phillies were doing well, and eventually the Phillies won one, and once that happened, it became this. Well, everyone's got to do it. We have all this talent here, and it was. And you look at a guy and the one that sticks out to me is Sergei Bobrovsky.
I was just about to say that Bob, I think, is the one.
That's probably the one. What's he won? 2 Vezinas since we got rid of him.
I mean, he backboned the Florida Panthers to the best record in hockey this year. I
mean, was there enough talent in front of him on the defensive end? I don't know, but I mean, he was a guy that I remember watching. There was I've never seen anybody close a 5-hole faster. In a Flyers uniform, his ability to go from vertical to shut it down was amazing. We went to a different. Who we go with? we went with a different Russian.
Brizgalov,
Yeah,
right?
that's when you went
Briz,
Brizgalov.
Briz, yeah. And he was supposed to be the next big show and was not. And when Briz came in and they gave him a big contract, they let go of a couple really good goaltenders in the next few years.
They've had a lot in the pipeline too that they
worked on. And they just and now we're clinging to a Carter Hart, hoping and I'm like, I don't know what to believe anymore. Like,
well, and again, it's the problem isn't more in front of him than it is him.
Yeah, and maybe we never get our Bernie Perrant. Maybe we do. But I think with particularly Bob would have been the one that I'm like that seemed like he was the best candidate for it, and they just cut him early, and it was really a shame. But that's like a recent memory. What if? I'm sure there's more historical what ifs for the Flyers.
Yeah, well,
but that one sticks out in my lifetime.
We'll go with that one. EJ, do you have one for the Rangers?
This year, actually, what if they won Game 3?
Good point.
Tampa.
Yeah.
I mean, they were up 2-0 in the third period. Chance to take 3-0 lead in the series, and I mean, maybe Tampa still comes back. I don't know, but 3-0 lead is pretty tough to come back from. They win Game 3. They probably win that series.
There you go. And what could have been? Matt for the Flyers.
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier in terms of who I would bring back for the Flyers, and I mentioned Eric Lindros. So rather than say what if he didn't have all the concussions he had, I would say what if we didn't bring Bobby Clark back as a GM that second stint to kind of tie into the Lindros years, because that was kind of more so the issue for the Flyers and Lindros was just disagreements between those two.
Sure.
And ultimately, like Flyers ownership is tending to do, they stick with the wrong person and they stuck with Bobby Clark. We lost Eric Lindros, and we haven't really seen much hope out of the Flyers team, and short of some spurts like in 2010 and the bubble years.
One last hockey what if is what if Jaromir Jagr was human?
Well, that's true. That's true. He's still campaigning for at 50 years old. He's still campaigning for
still wants to play
somebody to sign him. I mean, he's still playing in Europe, so why not? Let's go to baseball. I will start off. What if Jeffrey Mayer didn't catch Jeter's fly ball? That was ruled spectator interference. The Orioles would have taken control of that series against the Yankees. I think they go on to win. That was the last time the Orioles were great, really. I think they had a World Series shot in them at that point. But if that little fucker doesn't catch that ball, or if the umpire just rules it correctly, like he can catch the ball, if the umpire rules it an out, then that changes things. Matt, we'll go to the Phillies with you.
Yeah, so we're going to go to 2011, the NLDS. It was Game 5, Phillies versus Cardinals, and Raul Ibanez hit a fly ball to right field that landed like 13 inches in front of the fence and was easily caught, just short of being a 3-run home run. So Phillies lose that game 1-0. But that was part of the 4 aces and a joker rotation that we had. So if we win that game 3-1, Howard's not trying to hustle out a ground ball at first base in the ninth and tearing his Achilles. And B, we probably easily get past the Brewers and likely win another World Series and get Roy Halladay that title that he deserved.
There you go. EJ, what's your what if with the Mets?
This one still burns you up. What if Carlos Beltran, 2006 NLCS against the Cardinals? What if Beltran does not strike out looking? Game 7.
In a
to this day, burns me up.
In a reversal of fortune, what if Buckner plays that ball?
I like reality better.
Sean, the Phillies for you.
I don't have a lot of what ifs for the Phillies. It's just hard with Philadelphia because usually it's like, what if we had just signed this person, or what if we had actually spent the cap room that we had, or and it's frustrating. But I feel like for me it was like, what if in 2009 we hadn't tried so hard? And it's a weird way to say it, but I feel like it was the one time that I can remember like our front office trying too hard, where it was like, well, let's just buy all the pitching. Let's buy all the pitch. And God, I wish they would try that again. But Jesus Christ. Their heart was in the right. It was like the one time that the front office's heart was in the right place. Well, if we just buy all the pitching, we won't need to score as many runs. And turns out you do, because they spend it all on the front end and not on the bullpen. And you ran into a Yankees team that just kind of outplayed you. I mean, which is hard to. I think they were trying to hedge their bets, but they're like, look, we can't afford offense. let's find Roy Oswald, and then a part of me is like, what if they just stuck with Cliff Lee, or they stuck with Cliff Lee? They bailed on the wrong ones. Once they started disassembling, they bailed on the wrong ones.
That was the other one. What if they hadn't traded Cliff Lee because they felt like they had to when they got Roy Halladay? Because if they have both of them a year earlier,
that was
in 2010,
they bailed on Cliff Lee.
Yeah, that just for
Cliff Lee had
rebuild.
a couple more good years in him, and that would have been amazing. What if Matt Stairs was faster? He could play every day. There's a lot of, but yeah, I think for me, like the 2009 had a ton of what ifs, but yeah, I think it was just what if we hadn't just put all on pitching and just hope that would do it. It just wasn't enough.
All right, let's close out with the NFL with my Cowboys. Matt, you brought him up earlier when talking about Notre Dame, but this to me is one of the bigger what ifs in Dallas Cowboys history, because they had a shot. This seemed like the Jerry Jones pick, and for once they didn't do it. They didn't do the flashy pick. They picked Greg Ellis. But what if the Dallas Cowboys draft Randy Moss in 1998? I think there's a little bit of lease of life at the end of the Aikman career, and whatever quarterback fills in next, maybe would have had a better shot. Yeah, I forever have wished I would have seen Randy Moss in a Cowboys uniform. Sean with the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, Lord knows if the Flyers have and the Phillies have a lot of what ifs. Lord knows the Eagles have an encyclopedia of them. Because obviously the other direction from what we're trying to do is what if Carson Wentz doesn't get injured in that season? Who knows? Maybe they win it anyway. Maybe he carries confidence and he's our franchise quarterback. Instead, we traded our Super Bowl winning quarterback. Let's move on from that. For me, it's more game specific, I guess. I don't know. What if Jerome Brown doesn't die in a car accident? Like, that's a big one for me. Like,
That's a huge one.
I mean, that was one of the most feared defenses in the history of football. That was Buddy Ryan. After that moment, was just kept trying to recreate what he had built in Philadelphia. Philadelphia just let him keep getting meaner and meaner, and he's like, I want the meanest, angriest defense that you could, and he got it. And I'm not saying, obviously one guy couldn't do it, but I feel like that's a big one, in the early 90s. If Jerome Brown can be held on to as that kind of cornerstone, maybe Reggie White sticks around. Like if they get a Super Bowl or even an appearance sooner, and Reggie White doesn't need to run away to get one, I think that could have been a really good defense for a really long time.
I'm convinced.
In my opinion,
I'm convinced that if Randall Cunningham stays healthy in that era, and they keep the defense together for a couple of years, they actually might stunt the Cowboys one of those years, because that Eagles team was growing. That Eagles team was on the way up in '92, and then you get Clyde Simmons and Reggie White and then Reggie goes to Green Bay, and that's the end of that. But God, that defense was. I'm a Giant fan. That defense was scary.
It was an awful time for anybody that came to town, and that's what Buddy wanted.
Yeah.
All right, EJ, with the Giants.
Giants. What if Pascal didn't shoot himself in the foot?
I mean,
this is the year after he won a
You
Super
are the
Bowl
one
7.
franchise that gets to take that figurative statement and just it's literal in New York.
Mhm.
Everybody, what if we didn't shoot ourselves in the foot? The
Exactly.
Giants are like, what if we actually didn't shoot
The
ourselves?
Giants just won a Super Bowl the year before that. That team in 2008 was better than the one that won the Super Bowl the year before that on paper. and they were 11-1 when that whole incident happened, and they just fell apart after he was out for the year.
Yeah,
They might win the Super Bowl the year.
Good point.
All right, Matt.
My other big one was like, what if the other one I debated was like, what if Alshon had just caught?
Oh yeah,
because like Nick Foles might still be a name. It's kind of one of those like. Because I think if Alshon catches that ball the year after in the play, I feel like we would have just steamrolled right through that. Like we were on the move, and I feel like that was one that in my head stuck out as like Nick Foles might be a two-time kind of talk at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But
for the record, that year, the 2008 year, we lost you guys in the playoffs. So
it's true.
All right, Matt, close us out for the what ifs. What is your what if for the Philadelphia Eagles?
Yeah, so I was going to lean towards the Randall injury because, like that was alluded to, that team probably stays intact. They'll see success. Reggie probably doesn't leave for Green Bay. But just to take things a little differently, I'll say, what if in 2004, T.O. does not get hurt leading up to the Eagles playoff run, and he's fully healthy in that Super Bowl? Because, he put up 9 for 122 on an injured fibula. If he's at 100%, I don't think Spygate even makes a difference. I think.
Well, and just the run through the playoffs leading up to that, it would have been that team was
just in the zone 100%.
Well, McNabb was at his best because he finally had
the best
guy.
Yeah. We probably see a Super Bowl win, and we probably don't see a T.O. and McNabb breakup the next year. We probably see that duo set some records in the coming years as well.
Probably.
All right. That is a solid one. And with that, gentlemen, we close the book on the 2022 off season. The next time we come back together, it will be Tuesday night, August the 23rd, and it will be the kickoff of the new weekly live shows for Huddle Up Podcast. So, Matt, any place where they can follow you to keep up with what you're doing?
Yep, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at 3CT Affiliate. The number 3, the letter A. Philly is in Philadelphia. The number 8. You can hear me on Thursdays and Tuesdays on the 3CT podcast, talking all things professional wrestling. Twice a year on the Earnestly Speaking podcast, maybe once a year on the Take 3 Wrestling podcast, and every Monday on LinkedIn, on YouTube at the Maximize Monday podcast.
All right, EJ, how about you?
Earnestly Podcast, all podcast catchers, Twitter, EJ7, and that's all I got for you.
All right, Sean, I think you have a Twitter maybe sometimes.
I still do. I have 2 young kids, so I never get on there. But it's at Sean Shine State. If I am going to tweet anything, that's where you'll find me. At Sean Shine State down here in the state of Florida. Just living it up in the city of Tampa Bay, hoping we stop winning shit down here. But you got beaches. You need titles, but that's where you can find me.
Yeah, and it was good to have you back on a couple of these off-season episodes. Hopefully we'll hear from you in the upcoming season again. Tuesday night, August the 23rd. Pay attention to our social media. We will be, letting you know what time the live shows will begin. But make sure you are following us at Huddle Up Podcast, Facebook, and Twitter, so you do not miss any of those announcements. Subscribe to the show, all podcast platforms, YouTube as well. Get the merchandise over at tpublic.com. If you enjoy the show, share it with somebody. And until next time when you hear and see us live on the show, stay safe, stay smart, and go for the win.